So I really want to just totally derail what we were just talking about, because I was watching the news yesterday. I want to talk about Phoenix, Arizona.
Consent decrees.
Oh,
Yes.
well,
I'm throwing the grenade in.
Before you answer that, what is the best way to get off of a consent decree? Because I know what your answer is going to be.
I think I know.
Never get on one.
I've heard this from big city chiefs all over the country. I'm doing this to avoid a consent decree. I'm doing this to avoid DOJ scrutiny. Once again, if you start from a faulty premise, you're never going to get to a great solution. The Department of Justice or the federal government has no right to be in a local jurisdiction. It's called the 10th Amendment. I know we are kind of Constitution stupid these days. If you read the 10th Amendment, there's no right of the federal government to be involved in anything in a local government, including law enforcement. The only reason consent decrees exist, and if people don't know what they are, it's what the Department of Justice calls their reform mechanism for local law enforcement. Now, first off, it's kind of hilarious that the DOJ thinks they can reform anybody because they've never reformed the ATF or the FBI or, I saw a video just a week ago where these ATF guys in Arkansas crazy stuff that goes on. We all know the stories, right? So they pick and choose these cities based on politics predominantly. You're very rarely, they're going to, consent decrees are generally operating in a Democrats is trying to beat that record. And they destroy cities. They literally destroy cities, destroy communities. That's not me, it's the data. And so the fact that they reform agencies is hilarious. What it is the mechanism to defund and abolish the way they said. Politicians found out that by saying defund and abolish is not politically savvy. So it's a side door to destroy police departments. So, because think about it, if you have to destroy something before you raise up what you want, which is what we're seeing across this country. And so you can look at the cities they've been in. You're never going to go on a vacation, New Orleans, Seattle, Chicago, Portland, Cleveland. I could go on and on. I mean, every city, once it's the vast majority of the most violent cities in America are ran by the DOJ consent decrees. And so here's how they operate. This should tell you a lot. They're going to come into a city and they're going to go, we're going to launch a DOJ investigation. And the chief could just say, good luck. You can go to court and sue and we'll give you records and stuff. But I don't, because to me, a chief that advocates for this, and by the way, most chiefs do, oddly enough, it's the weakest leadership move ever. I don't need the DOJ to reform my department. I don't need an outside entity to make my department better. I'm the leader. I do that. But what these chiefs understand is certain chiefs that's politically savvy for them to do that, because a lot of these consent decree monitors are former chiefs, right? They're on consent decree teams. They make millions of dollars, folks. And once they get into your city, by the way, the only reason consent decrees exist is the city leadership agrees to it. That's the only way the 10th Amendment can be violated. The city leadership says, yes, please come in and help us. And so once they get in, they never leave. And the main reason is because it's not designed to leave. Nothing they do helps anything. And when the monitor is making $2, $3, $4 million a year to write 4 reports, who, by the way, doesn't even live in the city, right? Mainly lawyers from Washington, D.C. Are they ever going to be the ones, if they love their wife and love their beach house, to say, yeah, we're done here? No, they're going to keep taking that money. So that's why you see consent decrees are lasting 10, 20, 25 years. It costs on average $250 million a year for every 10 years. I believe Seattle is 240 million into it. They're 11 years into it. And nobody wants to look at this, but it's so destructive. And I'll give you a quick example. Phoenix City Council was one of the first major cities to say, by the way, if you say no to the DOJ, they are forced to go to federal court and sue the city. They can't. They may sue, but they'll never go to trial because there's never any evidence. You have to remember, the 94 Crime Bill gave the DOJ this power because if it's a pattern and practice, well, it doesn't define what a pattern and practice is. So in the case of Phoenix, they came out with that report today. They would list one example. By the way, they looked at Phoenix for 10 years. They've been to 40 million plus 911 calls in that time period. Probably been hundreds of millions of citizen contacts. They'll list one example and say pattern and practice. They were in Louisville. That report was so faulty. Even the activists read the report because, by the way, here's how the DOJ does it. They come into town. They talk to, this is what they did in Phoenix. They talk to the city. They say, hey, we investigated. It's bad. Sign this consent decree. And the city council, you got to give them credit, said this. Well, we're not going to sign this until you show us the investigation. The DOJ goes, we don't do that. Now, why wouldn't they want to do that? Because the investigation's faulty. In fact, even in Phoenix today, they released the summary. They didn't release the investigation. Okay. And so The only way the investigation gets released is if it goes to federal court as evidence. That's why the DOJ will never go to a jury trial, because it will, all the house of cards will fall. People will know what this is. And so my advice is, number one, don't ever let them in. Good luck. Right. 10th Amendment's there. Take us to court if you want, right? Constitution's to the Constitution. And if they do demand a consent decree, go take us to court. If you think there's evidence there, defend it in court. Because right now, they haven't had to do that. There's been 2 departments, I believe, in the last 30 years that said, take us to court, and the DOJ just went back to Washington, D.C. They know they can't do that. And the reason Phoenix, they came out and just blasted Phoenix today, is because they're mad because Phoenix wouldn't agree to a consent decree, and they're hoping that they're going to intimidate them into just signing off on it. And if you're Phoenix, if they love their community, they love safety, they're going to go, hey, if you think this is true, go to court.
Yeah.
And the DOJ may file the lawsuit, but they will never go through the court process where all the information is given up, because then people will see behind the scenes. Let me give you a quick example. In Louisville, the community read the summary, and the summary in Louisville literally said, all these officers are violating civil rights, criminal laws. They're doing this, they're doing that, doing this. And the community goes, how come you're not arresting them? And the DOJ goes, nah, we're not going to do that. Well, there's no evidence to do that. And the police department looked at some of the examples that were, some were just flat out lies. Other ones, they said, wait a minute, you use this as an example. We fired that officer. What are you talking about? This is not some pattern in practice. You use one example, we fired the officer. The problem is they'd already signed off on it. So once you sign on the dotted line without seeing the investigation, it's over. And so Phoenix is an interesting place because it's a swing state. It's sort of a 50-50 politically city. And the council was probably pretty evenly split on that. Instead of just one mayor like Louisville that could sign it, it took the whole city council. And they at least had the brains to go, okay, we talked to New Orleans. They're screaming to get you out of here. You won't leave. We talked to Seattle. They're screaming to get you to leave. They won't leave. Albuquerque's in dire straits. You've been there 10 years. So we'd like to see the investigation first before we sign it. And the DOJ goes, no, which should have told you everything you need to know.
Exactly.
Folks, if there's any sense of right and wrong, the Congress would get rid of this law. This law is unconstitutional. That's why they have to get agreement for cities to do it. But, there's been Republican presidents and Republican Congresses. They're not getting rid of it. They ought to have congressional hearings because the money flying around is pretty destructive. The guy that won the Minneapolis monitor position is going to get paid millions. He has an LLC out of a house. He's never done it before. I mean, there's like this, it's just like this hodgepodge of people that want to destroy law enforcement. They're all kind of in on it. And, I would recommend everybody follow Bob Scales on LinkedIn because he really is one of the few people that goes into detail. And man, it will just, it's so crazy you won't believe it. And Phoenix has a great website up, and I've never seen it done before, and it's so good they did it, and I hope it stays up forever because it's called SavePHX.com. They have taken all of this information over the last 30 years and compiled it in this website.
Good for them.
And
awesome.
You see it front and center, the destruction this stuff does. I'll give you one quicker example. When the DOJ got upset that the Phoenix Council wouldn't just sign off on their destruction, they ran, I don't know if they did this, but it was pretty apparent when all of a sudden you started seeing interviews from Albuquerque chief about how great the consent decree's been. Albuquerque's been in this 10 years. And the DOJ said, yeah, we have solved Albuquerque PD. Now, anybody that's familiar with Albuquerque knows that's not true. We solved Albuquerque. Look how much better it is. So I just did a quick Google search, and the DOJ came to Albuquerque a little over 10 years ago because they had 18 officer-involved shootings. Now, just stop right there. What does that have to do with anything? What's the facts on those shootings?
Look how big that city is.
And I know from a source in Albuquerque that none of those shootings were out of line or a problem. They just used the number, right? 10 years later, last year, they broke the record on officer-involved shootings, and their violent crime is up 80%. And the DOJ is saying that's success. So when you talk to people inside these departments, they will just, it blows your mind what the DOJ does to them. It destroys departments. There's not one department they've gone to where the crime hasn't spiked, morale hasn't plummeted, and recruiting is gone. Every consent decree city is down at least 25% of officers. The problem in Phoenix, if they pass it, Phoenix is down 25% right now. And when you look at the history of consent decrees, they lose between 15 and 25% of their agency within the first few years of consent decree. So is Phoenix going to go from 25 to 50% down? Their union did a survey, And about 20% of the guys says, yeah, I'm out. Day it drops, I'm out. And that's
Yeah, I'm out of here.
Happened. So I think that was enough for the city council to go, we better slow this down a little bit.
I think a lot of these councils, and being a former councilman, they get into this because they go in blind. They don't understand the rules, right? And you mentioned $250 million over 10 years. The police department budget in the village where I was at is 75% of the city budget is police, right? So we're talking about how much money are you going to be paying over and above your operating costs of your police department to pay these knuckleheads, right, to come in and tell you what you're supposed to be doing. I think the absolute best decision ever is to leave them out of the door. If you want your crime in your local municipality, your agency, at a minimum, let the cops go do their job. And that's the problem we're having today. I feel.
DOJ is a monster, Mark. I mean, tell you how they have to play ball. They don't go into a city unless the cards are right. I'll give you an example in Phoenix. Right. Phoenix named an interim chief that was the major over the Baltimore consent decree. They then hired the lawyer to help them navigate the DOJ investigation.
Yeah.
So it used to be a lawyer for the Department of Justice. So the cards were in play here. And so when the chief goes to the city council, the lawyer says, hey, we should probably do this, blah, blah, blah. But city council is just going to go, okay. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's who I did. Now, I don't know the details of that, but I know this. There was enough. I don't know anything about the chief or anything. All I'm saying is, no one find that odd, right? That before he was the major over the consent decree in Baltimore, he was a chief in Louisville. Or a commander in Louisville was consent decree. So they all sort of run these same circles. So the DOJ is not going to really land in a city where they don't have some pieces in place to sort of prop them up and make people believe that they're there to help. But all you have to do is read. That's why that website's so important, because you can look at that website. And even the mainstream media is now sort of going, what's going on here? You've seen some things pop up out there going, really? This is – because truthfully, the DOJ is doing exactly what they're supposed to be doing. Their idea of reform is not our idea of reform. Our idea of reform is a better department and a safer community. That's not what their idea is, because they will say Albuquerque's success even though violent crime's up 80%. And that's spooky to me that our own leaders are letting that happen. So you're right. To sum this up, the way you deal with them is you don't let them in the hen house, man. They're going to destroy all the chickens. And but most chiefs, political chiefs especially, are very nervous to do that. Even in Phoenix today, after what they said about Phoenix was literally half a bunch of nonsense. I mean, just crazy stuff. They should kick him out immediately. They should say, get out of our city. Because the Phoenix has spent $6 to $8 million to help the DOJ investigate themselves. So they're spending all this money to help them destroy them. And that's why leadership's important. We have leaders, unfortunately, that they want to be popular. They want to go with the flow. They want to do things and not rock the boat, instead of standing up and doing what's right. And that's why we need true leaders.